For the past few months, I've been digging into a vile and disturbing online cult called 764. I have put together everything I've been able to uncover about him here in this video, because as much as I wanted to go piece by piece with everything I found, there's a reason this deep dive is as long as it is. This is a group your parents warned you about as kids. These are the people who stalk and blackmail you online, and all those secrets that have been kept under wraps since its inception are about to unfold right here in this video. This is 764. Despite being a relatively unknown group up until very recently, the origins of 764 are actually quite simple. It all starts with a young teenager named Bradley Chance Cadenhead, in which he'd go by the online name Brad764, bottle of ibuprofen 764, and Felix during his time online. Now Bradley here wasn't your normal kid growing up over at his hometown of Stephenville, Texas. His mother described him as a non-verbal bullied kid who wasn't even able to go to high school because of his issues, with him finding solace on the internet as his only place to pass the time between his studies. When he was just 13 years old, he had his first run-in with the police after threatening to shoot up his middle school on September 12, 2018, with other kids speaking up and saying he was even telling someone else how to build a bomb a few days before that as well. A few days later on the 18th, a new kid would report that Bradley had actually started these threats on the very first day, saying how he would say this all the time as they had lockers near each other, and at one point says how Bradley wanted to carve pentagrams into the table and kill everybody around him. That same day, a teacher named Mrs. Vandenberg would put in a request saying that she wanted him out of her class as he had been making threats against the school, such as getting guns and putting silencers on him, making bombs, and watching violent killing videos on YouTube. A couple days later on the 25th, police would be informed by a parent that Bradley was still making threats against the school on social media by their son, with one of the posts Bradley made showing him pointing a gun at the camera and saying, "Guess what? I still don't care." On the 26th, one of his teachers would turn in the school iPad he had for one of his classes, and while a lot of it is edgy and dank memes such as one that says, "Well ma'am, dank memes, how to doggo 420 lit fresh fat off disabled humor comedy funny," the most disturbing of the bunch would be that he was found looking up questions on devil worshipping, and given the whole threatening to shoot and blow up his school and wanting to carve pentagrams into the desk, I'm sure y'all understand why they were worried about him still. On the 27th, the investigation would end, with the school saying they planned on filing terroristic threat charges against Bradley. Thus far as I can tell during my research, that never seemed to actually happen and everyone kind of just moved on from it. About a year after the school incident, Bradley would try to self-end in June 2019 but failed, in which they will learn that he's had these tendencies before since back in December 2016 when he was just 11 years old when he started to cut. Just 2 months later in August 2019, he'd be sent to the Red River Hospital in Wichita, Texas for threatening to kill his own father, and after this would start therapy at Rockdale Academy from August 22nd to February 28th, 2020 for around 6 months total. He would even be prescribed a list of medications by a psychiatrist in October 2021 that you can see right on screen, showing that he was indeed a pretty messed up kid through and through. He would repeat 8th grade twice due to not passing at his grade level and would only last a week in high school starting in fall 2020, eventually dropping out entirely because of this. It was during this time where Bradley was aimlessly looking around the internet that he would find himself a community of people that had similar interests like him, except as we know, these interests aren't exactly the good kind. In November 2020, soon after dropping out of school, Bradley would come across a Discord server named Cult, with a capital U spelled as a V for edgy aesthetic purposes. It was started by a French guy named Rohan in 2019, and it's also rumored that he was a young man when he started it as well. Rohan would get easy to manipulate people into his server and Telegram chats, first getting them to post NSFW content of themselves, be it adults or underage teenagers. This would then be used to extort the victim further by threatening to release it online or send it to their families, in which he and other members would start to get the victims to commit more and more disturbing acts, such as getting themselves to cut their names or symbols into their skin, a practice known as cut science. In fact, a 21-year-old member of Cult named Caleb Christopher Merritt would drive all the way from Texas to Virginia to kidnap a 12-year-old named Allie Broadway in February 2021, but thankfully she would be found very quickly and he would be sent to jail. In June 2022, he would be found guilty for his crimes, in which he would be sentenced to a whopping 350 years in prison, showing just how evil this man is and that the police weren't messing around here. Cult has even gone as far to push their victims into committing on camera, such as one person in a bathtub with pills and another by hanging, showing this isn't some BDSM stuff like how they initially tried to brand themselves as. This is taking advantage of extremely vulnerable people for their own sick kicks. The point here is, Cult is a very screwed up place of people that can and will take advantage of anyone and torture them until they somehow escape, be it by leaving the internet or pushing them into committing. Now Bradley would become fascinated with Cult due to the power he was now able to have over others after years of being on the receiving end of the stick throughout his entire time in school, and so he decided to start up his own group called 764 just a month later, December 2020, when he was just 15 years old, naming it after the first 3 digits of his zip code. 764 would take everything Cult was doing and crank it up to 11 by focusing on underage children in specific and introduce animal torture into the mix, with him and others often getting underage teenagers to post NSFW pictures of themselves, leveraging that to get them to make cut signs, and getting them to kill their animals and sometimes even themselves on camera. Members that even have their victims write their names on the walls of wherever they lived in their own blood blood or blood of their pets, often making them draw satanic symbols and Nazi symbols and other similar things as well. CP trading also became prevalent within 764, with screenshots of members paying each other for links to download the material leaking out, and even some people straight up making exclusive Discord servers for their friends to send it between one another as well. It got so bad that the white supremacist movement White Lives Matter Telegram chat even had a bot that would automatically kick out any of the users who's been in a 7.6 group from ever entering, showing that even some of the worst wanted nothing to do with them. 764 would very quickly eclipse cult and notoriety within mere months of its existence, and alongside that, other members would start to form their own splinter groups, such as Court, Cascar, Harm Nation, Leak Society, 7997, 555, Slit Bunnies, and Hell. I know there's a couple more out there, but these are the main ones I kept coming across in my search online, and I want to go over one group in specific to really show you the kinds of people that are part of these circles. Sometime in fall 2024, a 764 member named Foreign would put in his plan in motion to start a new group called 5150. He would put out his recruitment page for those wanting to join and post the requirements, such as how cut signs should be made and that they encourage others to murder people and such. However, the very day it launched, they'd find one of their members looking up CP on his iPhone with no VPN on his home Wi-Fi, showing that they ain't exactly attracting the smartest bunch out there. And later that same day, Foreign would close the group entirely due to the fact they're probably already on the FBI's radar given what just went down, meaning that 5150 didn't even last a full 24 hours. I wanted to show y'all this to make it clear that there are splinter groups that haven't even made it a full day and that some of the members are pretty stupid, because even though there are people involving themselves in these disgusting circles, there have been a bunch of arrests already made despite 764 only existing for less than half a decade up to this point, but we'll get into those later. Throughout 2021, Bradley would participate in his own extortion sessions both by himself and with other people, such as with his friend Moist Nigerian in January 2021 in a video they uploaded to YouTube at one point in time titled, "Dad Walks In on the Discord Grooming Session."
Hey, can you hear us? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, what's up? Yeah, I'm 27 years old, by the way, and I want your daughter to do stuff for me.
Okay, that's fine. I'll report you to police.
Oh, I'm sure you will, fatty. Can you leave the room, though?
Do you want to die tonight?
Moist Nigerian actually has a history of DDoSing and hacking into people's Steam accounts and playing CSGO with him, so to see him involving himself in 764 wasn't too surprising. He even had another notable instance of extortion back when he forced a girl to cut her hair on video, showing that he very much enjoyed messing with people for his own sick kicks.
Okay, get your hair. It's chopping time.
In March 2021, the police in Albuquerque, New Mexico began looking into Moist Nigerian, in which they would reveal back in November 2016 he sent CP over Skype, and that from October 2019 to May 2021 they would get reports of him now posting CP on Discord and also extorting underage people to produce it for him. On June 21st that year, they would raid his place, and he would go on to admit to downloading and sending CP for shock value, and that he's been banned on Discord a total of 60 times, meaning that there could have been far more he's done that they won't ever be able to figure out. They would reveal his name as Zachary Dosh, and he would plead guilty to cyberstalking and CP charges in December 2022 and faces up to 50 years in prison, but as far as I can tell, he hasn't been sentenced yet, as his hearing in March 2024 was cancelled with no updates on it until now. If you ask me though, he's probably going to jail. By May 2021, 764 had started to make his face known to the public as Redditors would start to talk about them and the disgusting things they do, and around that time, that's when they really started to make themselves known on the internet in general. They would scour Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Roblox, Discord, any social media or social platform that could have minors on it. They were waiting in the shadows trying to drag them into their cult to torture them. Remember Riley Williams, the Capitol stormer during the January 6, 2021 insurrection that stole Nancy Pelosi's gravel hammer thing? The one who was sentenced to 3 years in jail in March 2023 for leading people towards Pelosi's office to steal as much of her stuff as possible? Turns out she was a known figure in 764 related groups, as in one of their Telegram channels someone would ask why Riley is in jail, another would specify the girl or boy Riley, and the user would go on to say that she wasn't anymore, at the time anyways, and that she stole Pelosi's laptop, which we now know wasn't the case, but it was the gavel instead, but she still led that group into the office to begin with. Now I couldn't figure out if Riley herself was a member of these groups or if it was just gossip, but that part where they had to specify which of the Rileys it was suspicious enough to warrant me to show it to y'all, so there you have it. That same May, a YouTuber named Feline-san would upload a video going over a hate group she was added to on Instagram called Applebee's, a group affiliated with 764 that was using Instagram specifically to hunt down underage people who had given to their demands after getting them to join their Discord server. Around this time, a video recorded back in April where they made a girl cut her hamster's head off would start to make the rounds, and Bradley would affiliate himself with a user from the Brazilian CP site Amorzino, eventually getting a call-out post on the Telegram channel Pedo Hunters on May 7th after he and whoever the Brazilian was tried to sell an 11-year-old girl online. He would eventually lose contact with the Brazilian, in which Bradley would start to join pro-LGBT servers to drag more victims into 764, and in June that year would even team up with a group called NeoHub to get even more people into his server. NeoHub was basically a regroup server on Discord and Telegram for Zeus sadists whenever their respective servers got deleted, and was owned by Jaden Kors aka Gorvoj, a 24-year-old who would edit Zeus sadism videos and thankfully died back in December 2021, so at least there's one good ending going on here, I suppose. Now during that same June when Bradley was dragging in the worst humanity has to offer so they can torture animals and children, Stephenville police would be notified by the Dallas Police Department's Child Exploitation Unit that a Discord user named Felix was caught posting swats of CP on the application, and as you just learned, Felix was one of the names that Bradley went by. After digging into everything over the summer, they would execute a search warrant at Bradley's place on August 25th and take his electronics, also finding 2 phones hidden in his dresser, which doesn't exactly help his case at all. They would book him as a juvenile on August 28th, with his father showing disappointment that he was sending these images around online, and 2 days later would be given an ankle monitor as they investigated further. On March 24th, 2022, the police would discover multiple images of CP on Bradley's laptop with over 20 unique images being listed in a bunch, including images of cut signs with the words Brad is a pedo and 764 as well. It was a pretty cut and dry case of extortion of minors and CP, and so a year later on March 27th, 2023, Bradley Chance Cadenhead would plead guilty to 9 counts of possession of CP, and at the age of just 17 years old would be sentenced to 80 years in prison. He's currently located at the Estelle Unit Prison in Huntsville, Texas, and will likely stay there for the rest of his life, as I highly doubt he will ever be released. An officer would actually meet up with him in April soon after this sentencing and would ask general questions, in which he learned that Bradley started viewing NSFW material by 8 years old, and that when he was 10 he was introduced to Gorn Shock videos and continued to view them all the way up until he was 16. Bradley even says that it was a friend he met on Minecraft that helped him go further down this path of gore and violence, in which he then found Colt and then made 764 a month after, as we just learned. He admitted to sending CP on Discord for shock value and that he would participate in these extortion calls as a way to gain money and sometimes just have power over the person, even admitting himself in his own words that 764 was a cult that he created. The rest isn't anything we haven't seen or gone over already, so I'm not going to go into detail on that as it's more of the same. There was one last thing I wanted to go over though, and that's this note at the very top of Bradley's court document directed at any future individuals at his parole hearings. This note explicitly warns him about the things Bradley has done and to look into every single piece of evidence about him before deciding to free him one day. I'd argue calling him dangerous is even an understatement, as Bradley has shown to be one of the most evil people we've ever looked into, and when seeing this myself, as soon as I loaded it up on my computer, I knew I was in for something else if even the authorities felt the need to start things off on a note like this. Lo and behold, I was right, but thankfully Bradley is in jail, and if you ask me, he probably won't be getting out anytime in his life. Now, I don't need to drag things out for y'all here to show y'all just how bad all this is, because I think you get the point already. Bradley Cadenhead, at just 15 years old, started up one of the nastiest online cults in the modern internet age, and even though he's now in prison, things would run smoothly as ever thanks to this decentralized structure of running through Discord and Telegram chats. It would be around Bradley's arrest that they would start to ramp up some more, as despite him having no way to access his cult anymore while under police investigation, darker forces would catch interest in this group and plan their own course of action. But before we get into those darker forces, there's a couple members I wanted to go over in specific, because even though Bradley was now gone, 764 was just getting started here. Back in January 2024, a Twitter thread would go viral showing a guy sitting on his bed getting attacked by his mom's boyfriend, just barely missing and grazing his ear in the process. The sheer absurdity of the event caused it to go viral online, and in the process turned the victim, Kyle Spitze, into a short online figure, even getting an interview and appearance on Law and Crime Network, a YouTube channel with over 5 million subscribers at the time, showing just how widely this news spread around the internet. However, just mere weeks after this viral attention, Kyle would find himself in trouble yet again, only this time instead of being the poor defenseless victim, those looking into it would wish in hindsight that the bullet didn't miss, and you'll soon see why. On August 23, 2023, the Blount County Sheriff's Department responded to a call in Friendsville, Tennessee about a domestic dispute involving a shooting. Turns out that 68-year-old Jeffrey Scott West barricaded himself in his home after shooting his partner Melanie's son, 24-year-old Cal Spitze, in the right ear. Cal would sustain non-life-threatening injuries and get in and out of the hospital quickly, recording the whole incident in the process as you saw earlier. On his Telegram account Criminal, he would go on to confirm to a friend that Jeffrey died via self-inflicted gunshot wound, with things wrapping up shortly after the police had solid evidence he was the aggressor. Now this story would stay within small circles until someone on Twitter named Sag would post on their account on January 15th, 2024. Despite probably just posting it for a small circle to see, it will go viral online due to its absurd setup, such as a mother having her shorts down, the immediate hostility without any context, and the fact Jeffrey missed a point-blank shot at Kyle and barely injured him as well. People would meme on this video for a while after it came out, and most people move on afterwards and see it as just another viral internet moment and nothing more. Now that interview with Law and Crime would happen on January 18th, just 3 days later, and when listening to it from beginning to end, it doesn't really sound like anything weird or insane. It's mainly just Kyle saying he got some stitches in his ear, his mom's pants are down because she was in a restroom, and basically just saying his relationship with Jeffrey was cool for a while until they started to argue a bunch. Push came to shove, one night he got extra mad when he was drinking, and well, you already know how it ended. It's not the most interesting thing. At one point, he mentions that he didn't start recording to send it to the police, but rather to use it against him the next day, something that seemed a little bit odd to me, as why would you not report something like this to the police at all?
Police at the time, I didn't think he was going to shoot me, to be real. I just started recording him to make him look like, to show him the next day how he acted, so that he could feel bad about it or whatever.
Now most people move on after this virality ended, except things will start to get weird as on January 16th, a day after the video was posted online and just 2 days before the interview, Twitter user Baby Teeth Girl would reference how her ex had gone viral but alleged very serious stuff on him, quote, "I cannot believe my ex has gone viral, MFAO, I hope it haunts him for the rest of his life what he's doing to me and multiple other girls and children," unquote. This had people interested, and so they'd check her account to see that just minutes prior she would say how he would post revenge images of her, other women, and children online and still preys on minors to this very day. The most interesting part would be this, however, in which she straight up says that Cal grooms children and uses their nudes against them and stockpiles all NSFW pictures he obtains on Mega for these purposes, and also drops that he's part of the 764 cult. This would lead to people finding an old Nexpo Reddit page post on July 25th, 2023, in which the user explains how the group extorts minors on Discord and Telegram, but when reading towards the bottom where the user exposes a handful of names of these extorters, they just so happen to name Kyle Spitze as one of them, and they also just so happen to get his online name criminal correct, as if you remember earlier, that was his Telegram username. A photo from this 764 group will leak out showing the names of their most esteemed members, with Cal listed as one of them as you can see in the bottom left. Suddenly, it seemed there was something much deeper going on with Kyle and all the stuff surrounding him, and so the internet would do what internet does and dig into this man to see what exactly is going on here. I would find a Telegram channel Kyle owned called Criminal Content, and the stuff found within is some of the most vile stuff on the internet I've seen in a good while, with it being full of multiple different women and their various cut signs, a term used to describe someone cutting a certain phrase or figure into themselves, with the most common being the term 764 as expected, but also other stuff like lots of satanic symbols as well to really show just how insane and frankly evil everything going on here is. He'd also force them to cut his own name into them as a form of control, something that many of these extorters do as a way to humiliate those they go after online. He'd even take it a step further and make them write on the walls in their own blood if he so felt, showing that this 764 cult was a place of pure evil and that Cal wasn't this innocent man he portrayed himself to be on the internet. He would even go on to say how he's been doing this since 2016 and that he enjoys watching girls inflict pain upon themselves for him, even saying in his own words, quote, "I have a total of over 2,600 plus groom victims. My goal is to reach 3,000 before I get feted," unquote. If you thought this was already batshit and insane, it only gets even crazier, as when piecing all this together, I would find out that Cal is a cross-dresser as well, and given the dichotomy going on, I, alongside many others, wouldn't believe this at first. That is, until more images of him cross-dressing would start to get dropped online, making it clear that people weren't lying about this man and that this sick freak was into doing something that I don't think anybody would have ever expected. A video would even come out for any more doubters that might have been out there still, making it very obvious he is really just on another level of insane. Baby Teeth Girl would even be interviewed by a random person and drop some more info on him, such as that she made him eat his stuff, and that he apparently has a thing for getting his head flushed in the toilet. This sounded too good to be true on top of everything else we've already seen, but nope. Baby Teeth would end up dropping a video of her doing exactly that, alongside a second one he took of himself doing it alone on his own terms. When I first saw all this stuff, I thought it was too good to be true. I really did not think the cross-dressing and toilet thing was real, but when digging into it, it was real. And in turn, I learned that Cal's one of the sickest people online. It's just so insane to me seeing somebody who is going about expressing themselves through a body positive movement was also using other people's bodies against them to torture them by means of force and blackmail. The dichotomy going on here is so bizarre to me that even today it's still hard to wrap my head around it. Add that alongside the rumors that didn't even have any proof yet, and things are starting to slowly unravel here as the truth is starting to inch ever so closer to the public. As we can see, Cal is straight up evil without a doubt, and so as people are putting the pieces together here and unraveling the mystery behind him and his 764 group, the craziest thing would happen. On January 28th, just weeks after his viral fame, Cal would post a video on Telegram showing off his now dead mother in the motel they were staying at, with her face down and blood all over the bed she was laying in. He's crying in the video about how he just woke up and found her like this, but given his ties to 764, people started to speculate if he perhaps killed her instead in a fit of rage or delusion. However, there'd be some recent posts on his Instagram account, Fairy Blood Spirit, showing off some pills he got online, and they would then find a picture he took of the supposed purchase in question, with it being an order of oxycodone. People are still wondering where all the blood came from, and an article on Headline USA by Kevin Silva released a few days later on February 3rd would reveal after an interview with Cal's father Michael that Melanie had serious liver cirrhosis and she likely vomited it up during her last couple moments alive. They'd also point out she had a Narcan inhaler in her possession as well, making it more likely that Cal didn't murder her but she just OD'd on an unknown substance that he bought online while he was sleeping. What's a little bit interesting though is that Michael was extremely defensive about Cal and his affiliation with 764, saying, quote, "Yes, Cal's been involved with these idiots online for a number of years. Never has Cal actually done anything with these idiots." Yeah, okay. I don't know why he'd aspire to be like them, maybe because he thinks hacking is the coolest thing in the world, unquote. Even when Ken showed Michael that Cal had been making girls cut themselves and use their blood to paint words and symbols on the wall, Michael continued to be defensive about his son to him until they eventually stopped talking to each other. Also, Michael revealed that Melanie used to work for Lockheed Martin until 2016, a global security company, and Michael himself is said to work as a government contractor with secret security clearance, so this additional conspiracy notion added into the mix didn't help either. An obituary of Melanie would be posted online for the world to see, showing that she did die on January 28th, just 10 days after Kyle's interview with Law and Crime, for anybody wondering if this was somehow some elaborate hoax. On February 1st, a voice message of Kyle would be leaked, in which he mentions he was now being held in a psychiatric ward in the meantime.
Hey Skylar, it's Kyle. I just wanted to call you and let you know that I'm in a hospital. I don't like the psychiatric one, but I just wanted to hear your voice, yeah. You won't really be able to call back this number. I'll have to call you. But, I guess next time I call, if you see something pop up, you'll know it's me. So, goodbye.
He'd eventually be released soon after, and a couple weeks later on February 21st, it'd be revealed that Melanie's death would be ruled accidental and that Cal had nothing to do with it, with fatal levels of fent found in her system being the main contributor to her passing. As Cal was starting to ask people to donate to his GoFundMe to help cover the expenses on Facebook, one might notice that majority of reactions are the haha react, and given this is about his mother's death, it clearly meant something was going on here. It turns out that on February 27th, the FBI would partially unseal and release the affidavit on the arrest of Cal written by Special Agent Jason Stewart. It would reveal that FBI agents obtained a warrant for his phone on January 10th after starting an investigation on him and a large redacted amount of people or groups, getting it later that same day as they prepared to look into it. On the 16th, they'd finally get into digging into his files, in which they would find multiple image albums containing cut signs and other NSFW material of minors within them. They were able to get into contact with one of the underage victims and reveal that he made her make 16 images and 4 videos, and when checking his Telegram account, Criminal would find a set of messages he sent her between January 29th to February 5th, which I found the DMs in question coming from the minor side, also showing that Cal likely tried to mass delete all their messages as Telegram lets people delete messages on both sides. On February 20th, they would directly interview the victim in question and confirm that she was just 12 years old when Cal forced her to take those pictures and do those heinous things to herself. And so on February 21st, they would arrest him for child exploitation, and in turn a few days later would post this publicly for the world to see. There's a total of 33 pages in his affidavit, but the last 28 are completely sealed for privacy's sake, so we don't have any idea what those details entail, but if you ask me, I'm sure they're not good at all. On March 21st, 2024, an update will be posted saying that Cal pleaded not guilty to his charges despite the obvious evidence the FBI had on hand, with the total number of charges as follows: 3 counts of production of CP, 1 count of enticement, 1 count of possession of and access with intent to view CP, and 3 counts of distribution of animal crushing videos. Notably, the last animal crushing charge would even point out how in that specific video he would use its entrails to spell out Crim, short for his online name Criminal, showing just how sick in the head this man truly is at everybody keeping up. On April 3rd, his own lawyer would resign from the case due to a conflict of interest, but it was more so likely that after seeing the evidence for himself, he knew there was no way to defend this guy at all. On April 12th, Cal would be transferred to federal safe housing for his own protection, and for the next couple months, things would go silent as his trial was awaiting conclusion. On December 18th, 2024, Cal Spitze would plead guilty to 4 of the 8 charges against him, and notably his plea agreement has this stipulation attached to it, quote, part of his plea agreement entails him admitting that he committed his crimes with a terroristic purpose in mind, unquote. The plea agreement agreement itself is dated just a couple days earlier on the 10th, and it would go on to specify the charges in question that he was guilty for: 2 counts of production of CP, 1 count of distribution of animal crushing videos, and 1 count of possession and accessing with intent to view CP. It also reveals that he was a prominent member of one of the splinter groups named Harm Nation, and also went under the name Criminal Lolly, so to see he was into CP and all that isn't exactly shocking here. The agreement would go on to reveal that he had 25 photo albums for each minor that he abused online, and that's just the ones that they're able to actually, see. With one minor in particular, Cal would threaten to dox or swat them if they didn't give him NSFW images of themselves, and in fact would even try to get her to kill a chicken or lamb as part of his extortion against her. He'd also threaten to swat or dox another girl as well for the same exact reasons, showing that this is a pattern and he well knows what he's doing to his victims online. After going through it all, the plea agreement would state they're looking for a minimum of 30 years imprisonment for Kyle. And given the severity going on here, I'm willing to bet they'll probably give him the max and sentence him to life behind bars if you ask me. Either way, he's going to prison, so even if we don't have an exact date on how long or where he's even going to stay as of this video, his fate is all but sealed by this point. Of course, Kyle wasn't the only notable member of this cult, as there's another man I came across who was just as heinous as him during my time researching online. Doxbin is a website that has been used on many occasions to obviously dox and harass people online. It's a very unsavory website that is mostly used in a negative way to those who fall victim to whoever the poster is. But on October 24th, 2022, a Doxbin user named Pedo Hunters would release a long expose about a Discord user named Rabid7997. At first, it just seemed like any normal dox online, except in this case, the user would have receipts to back up his claims. As push came to shove, people would realize that Rabid7997 wasn't a victim of a harassment attack, but somebody who had a lot of stuff hiding in the closet, and of course, this stuff would be exposed for the world to see. Meet Rabid7997, aka 47-year-old Richard Anthony Reyna Densmore. Densmore would be the victim of this Doxbin article, except when checking out the evidence provided, it seemed that Pedo Hunters wasn't lying about him, as you're about to hear for yourself.
You ever just want to f a minor in front of people that hate you? I do. You ever just want to watch a minor f***ing herself in front of a bunch of haters? Minors. Minors.
That's some pretty bold stuff for a man in his late 40s to proclaim all nonchalant on the internet like that, and I'm willing to bet this is a clip that tipped off the Doxbin user to look further into the man and see what was up with him. That includes figuring out his past as a military man when he was young and in his 20s, and that also includes finding out that when he was 20 years old he had relations with a minor and was charged for it in the 4th degree, having to sign himself on the registry for 15 total years before that expired on March 18th, 2022. Of course, given that clip we just listened to, it was clear he was on the same wavelength, so to speak, and so that would lead to this Doxbin article dropping just 7 months later and introducing people to this sick man indeed. It turns out that Densmore here was an active member of Sewer, aka Sewer Pig, one of the many offshoots of the 764 cult, with this picture of a pig being their main calling sign of this sector online. There's some straight up evil people, no doubt, so it comes to no one's surprise that Densmore here has bragged about doing the same exact stuff to others online while somebody was recording unbeknownst to him. Now, unlike how most stories online go when it comes to these cases, Densmore would actually attract the attention of the authorities, as on January 31st, 2024, he would be arrested by the FBI due to a report of him making users on Discord create, distribute, and stream CP featuring self-harm during his time online. Turns out that just 2 months before the Doxbin post was made, the FBI would receive a complaint that he was grooming minors into producing CP and self-harm images, with the FBI figuring that out pretty quickly on their end. It turns out that it was a 15-year-old girl in question that Richard was grooming, in which for some stupid reason he would tell her his first name, which made things a whole lot easier for the FBI, in which he would get the girl to quote a video of herself on Sewer in which she inserted an ice cube into herself, unquote. Where things get weird is that back in February 2023, the FBI would actually raid his place and find sea salmon material related to the 764 cult, but he would end up staying a free man for another 11 total months due to what is assumed to be a very slow investigation for some reason. However, they raid him again in January 2024, in which they found 2 cell phones hidden in an air vent, and y'all already know this spells doom, as there's only one reason why anyone would ever hide their phone, let alone 2, in a spot like that. In fact, one of those contained the following pieces of media, quote, additionally, investigators found images on one of the phones that included a girl with rabid written on her forehead, and pictures of lines cut into a girl's legs in the letter R, bleeding, and another with cuts into a woman's chest, unquote. Now, despite these pieces of evidence being exposed during a court hearing, Judge Ray Kent overseeing the case would instead give him a $10,000 bond due to the fact there was no proof he was a hands-on offender, basically letting him free once more. Part of that defense included that he's a diagnosed schizophrenic with BPD because of his time serving in the military. But it didn't matter, as the judge made his decision and it was back to the drawing board. It was now up to Chief U.S. District Judge Hala Jarboe, who was overseeing the emergency motion here in the Department of Justice, put in to revoke his bond or not, and so people would sit by and wait to see what would happen to dear old Richard Densmore here. As people are waiting to see what the future held for Densmore, leaked recordings of some calls he had with other 764 members back during the February 2023 FBI raid would come out, in which he talks about how they waited for him to leave his home before detaining him, bragging about how they didn't catch any of the illegal material he had on him.
And then you know what they did at the end of it? They let me go.
The kids are stupid.
That's why I'm not in jail right now, because all the shit was, they looked through my phone, they looked through my blogs on Snapchat, Telegram, everything. There was no CP mega file with child porn in it. There was no grooming DMs. There was nothing. But they did find loaded weapons because I did have those, and those are illegal. And that's a felony. It's a 10-year felony. I'm going to be going to prison for that. Not for any satanic cult, not for any Discord grooming, not for any of that. Just for the weapons.
He would even show off a document the FBI gave to him in that call, showing that he wasn't lying to everybody and trying to make up stuff to seem cool or whatever. Now that emergency motion to revoke Densmore's bond, while certainly fun to read, really wasn't anything more we already learned here together, so it's not worth going too deep into it. That's not to say it wasn't interesting still, as it contained more photos of him, including what looked to be a screenshot of a screen recording he had doing God knows what's whatever underage kid he was abusing. Alongside that would be more random photos the FBI put together and snapped a picture of before going along their merry way. And the rest of the motion is what we've talked about already, except much deeper in detail law-wise, naming off the exact laws he broke and such. As his future hung in the balance, Densmore didn't seem too happy that this was getting in the way of his freedom, as a leaked Snapchat message would come out of him saying the feds are trying to get him for child exploitation, but then starts to complain how all he wanted was a satanic blood cult and nothing more, name-dropping somebody named Abby and saying she helped steal cultists from somewhere else to form Sewer. He then says somebody named Water was to blame for all the grooming stuff, but it was obvious he was just pushing blame onto someone else, as we already know he was doing this stuff as well. The other person in the Snapchat messages ask if they have any dirt on him, Densmore would say just the cut signs, and he would say it was GG for him and that he and another 764 member named Goon will carry his legacy on. Interestingly enough, Densmore would go on to tell him that they need to delete 764 members Epstein and Sakurun's Discord servers now, quite possibly due to the feds going through his phone, before the screenshot ends shortly after. I will say, I have no idea when these messages are posted as there's no date attached to them, but I believe they're related to the 2024 FBI raid, as he mentions they're going after him for child exploitation, whereas in a clip from the 2023 raid he said they found nothing of that in his house. However, it didn't really matter that much in the end, as just 3 days after the Department of Justice filed their emergency motion to revoke his bond, Judge Darbo would actually grant it, meaning that Richard Densmore here was heading straight to jail as they awaited his oncoming trial on April 2nd. That would happen, however, as on March 15th, 2024, Densmore had agreed to a plea deal in the terms within. What's interesting about the deal is it actually goes into detail on what he pled guilty to, in which on September 29th, 2022, he was coercing somebody he knew was underage to send an NSFW picture of her breast with his online handle Rabid written on them, even saying he'd buy her Discord Nitro to try and convince her into doing so. When this failed, he would go to the DMs of the girl's partner and try to convince them into letting her send a picture, also saying he'd give them Discord Nitro as well. Eventually, the partner would successfully convince the girl into giving in to Densmore's request, sending a picture of her entire frontal body naked with his name written on her chest. They now had hard evidence of him asking and successfully obtaining CP after he manipulated the parties into his bidding, and so in that plea deal, he would plead guilty to 1 count of sexual exploitation of a minor, a count that holds a 15 to 30 year sentence if convicted. His sentencing would be scheduled for November 7th, and on that very November 7th, 2024 day, Richard Anthony Raymond Densmore would get the book thrown at him and be sentenced to a maximum 30 years in prison, where he will rot until his late 70s, if he even makes it that far. The Department of Justice report that broke this news would drop even more information about Densmore and the stuff he was doing online. Quote, he threatened victims to cut themselves by telling them, I have all your information. I own you. You do what I say now, kitten. Densmore kept child CP and bloody images of Rabid, Sewer, and 764 carved into victims' limbs, in some cases with razor blades and box cutters nearby, unquote. It seems that it's all but officially over for the man, and now his life will be nothing but avoiding to let his little secret out in jail, because as we all know, life ain't exactly easy for pedos in prison. Also, since we're on the topic, here's a picture of his arrest back in January, here's a picture of when he was first transferred to jail, and here's the most current picture that has leaked out of him from beyond the barbed wire fence. It's safe to say Richard Densmore here won't have a good time behind bars, and thankfully another member of the 764 cult was caught and sent to prison like they all deserve to be. Now, Kyle and Richard were notable members of Deep to Explain stories, as they had a bunch of stuff to work with, but there were still many other members who got arrested just like them with shorter stories going on, so let's go and take a look at them together here. Murad Hidiri, aka Slain764, was another member of the 764 cult who on September 11th, 2024 would stab random people in Hasselby, Sweden. He would record himself stabbing 2 random people jogging in a park in specific, and the police would quickly figure out it was him thanks to the fact he published him on Telegram on a No Lives Matter related channel. No Lives Matter is also a splinter group related to 764, but there's much more going on with them in specific, as they just don't extort people online for their sick kicks, they actively participate in attacks themselves in real life. There's also a couple videos of him attacking random people from behind that I found and other stuff as well, such as him showing off a bunch of graffiti that he spread on a wall one night, showing that this dude is definitely a bit deranged. What's kind of interesting is that when looking into this, there was a thread on a Swedish forum called Flashback that was part of figuring out Murad's identity. They would end up doing so pretty quickly even before the arrest was made public, and during my research I found a video mocking his arrest with the hashtag FreeSlane764 shown at the end, making it very clear that other people are keeping up with his newfound attention on the group. Oh yeah, you may be thinking to yourself, man, Murad looks pretty young in that photo. Turns out he was just 14 years old when he stabbed those people, and though given earlier we already saw that a 15-year-old started up this cult to begin with, it's still pretty shocking seeing such a young face behind these acts of violence. Cameron Finnegan, aka Acid, is an 18-year-old member of 764 who was also up to his own stuff behind the scenes. In February 2024, after seeing a post from reporter BX talking about Kyle Spitze and his connection to 764, Cameron here decided it'd be a good idea to threaten to find out where she lived and and also adding killing her and her child alongside that as well. He would even take it to DMs and continue to threaten her and say how he's finding all her private information and stuff as he speaks. Basically playing internet tough guy and probably just going on Doxman looking for someone else's work instead of having the skills to do it himself. When he noticed that BX didn't seem too fazed by these threats, he would again head to her DMs and threaten her and her child once more, saying how he has all this info on her to try and goad her into a Discord call to probably call her names and such. And as for why Cameron was going after BX in specific, it's likely because she's been covering 764 for over a year now as one of the main people researching them before they became known by the mainstream media, and given since they weren't well known outside of niche internet circles, it made it easy for members to go after reporters talking about them. Well, despite his attempts to scare BX into submission, it wouldn't work, and things would only get worse for him as on April 3rd that year, he would get arrested for planning to attack a homeless person over in the UK where he lives. His trial would be set for October 4th, and that very day he'd plead guilty to 5 charges. 1 count encouraging or assisting self-deletion, 2 counts criminal damage, 1 count of possession of a document for terroristic purposes, and as expected to nobody's surprise, possession of indecent images, and more specifically for what I've been told, 6 images and 1 video CP. The terroristic guide in specific would be the No Lives Matter Kill Guide, an entire document made to teach people on how to commit terroristic acts of violence, such as one part where it tells people the weak points of the human body and how to properly attack somebody with a knife. It's some pretty gnarly stuff to read, and at the very end it notably ties No Lives Matter to something called MKU, which trust me, we'll get into that in the next chapter. What's disturbing is that after Cameron's arrest, other members of 764 No Lives Matter would start to vandalize property in a show of solidarity for him, with it mainly consisting of tagging walls with graffiti saying free acid and slashing tires of various random cars they'd come across. Of course these acts would be moot as on January 17, 2025, Cameron Finnegan would be sentenced to 6 years in prison, ending his short tenure in the public world as he prepares for life behind bars. There's not much else to say here, he played with fire and got burned, and now he'll have this hanging over his head for the rest of his life. On October 27, 2024, news would break that an 18-year-old Kentucky native named Curtis Hodge was arrested for calling in a bomb threat to the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office way over in Florida back on August 16th that year. They would end up finding out he was connected to 764 in the process, and as far as I can tell, nothing much has been happening on the legal side of things, though his mugshot would be posted online on mugshotsearch.net for anybody wondering what he looks like, so there you have it. On September 27, 2024, police in Vernon, Connecticut would arrest a 17-year-old girl for calling in multiple swatting and bomb threats to various schools and places of worship around town. More specifically, her charges are as follows: conspiracy to commit a threatening act in the 1st degree, conspiracy to falsely report an incident in the 1st degree, and conspiracy to commit breach of peace in the 2nd degree. They would find out she's also part of 764 as well, and though they haven't released her name given she was a minor at the time of her arrest, given how people are able to figure out Murad pretty quickly, I'm sure somebody's already put 2 and 2 together behind the scenes but hasn't released that info yet. On October 16, 2024, Australian police in New South Wales arrested 28-year-old Jake Thomas Vandermeer for grooming and extorting a 15-year-old girl he met online in Queensland, Australia. He would meet her on the anonymous video chat platform Emerald Chat in October 2023, a place that is often compared to Omegle, and y'all can already put 2 and 2 together here on this one. He would play games with her for hours on end on Discord and buy her gaming cards to keep her around. That is, until he got banned off it for posting CP, in which he would move things over to WhatsApp with her now that his Discord days were over. He would eventually get her to send NSFW images of herself to him and use it to extort her some more, eventually going on to threaten to kidnap her and such, in which she went to the police and he would get arrested. Vandermeer will be charged with using a carriage service to engage in NSFW activity with a child, planning to harm someone under 16, grooming someone under 16, threatening to kill, threatening to serious harm, sending indecent material to someone under 16, and causing child NSFW activity. I know he was refused bail at Coffs Harbour local court days after his arrest and reappeared there on December 10th, but I have no idea how Australian legal stuff works, so I haven't found any updates since then. Either way, being denied bail means he's still in jail awaiting trial, and given what was said about him, he's probably going to prison for a good while if you ask me. In March 2024, a Wired article will be written about 764 and a former child who was extorted by them named Sophia, going into detail on the group and its start and whatnot. While we already know all that, the article will start to talk about a member named Riley, a Romanian citizen whose real name is Francesco. Sophia would say how he got a lot of girls' attention easily because he was attractive, in which he would use his charms to extort them to get them to make cut signs, write in their own blood, and kill animals, posting the videos both they and he made as well. In summer 2023, he would get caught in charge of possession and distribution to CP, but would only get sentenced to just 3 years in prison at June 2023, even though he was 21 years old at the time of his sentencing. A Romanian website called Recorder brought up their own article about Francesco, revealing that he didn't have many friends and missed school a lot, also pointing out that he would brag about producing NSFW content and had an obsession with NSFW furry artworks as well. He only lasted 8 grades before giving up on his educational career, and even tried to start up a YouTube channel when he was around 13 years old as well. The article would also reveal that he originally got a suspended sentence in the initial court ruling, basically saying that he only produced and distributed CP and nothing more, and that he didn't know the identity of the children he extorted, but that last part would be proven to be false as they would have evidence on Telegram of him putting one of his victims' docs on the app in order to get people to go after him. This would lead to that 3-year sentence, and Francesco is currently located at the Codlia Penitentiary in Brazov County, Romania, where he will remain until June 2026. In that same Wired article we just went over, they'd also mentioned somebody by the name of Convict who would circulate around a guide made on how to groom minors, in which it points out ones with mental disorders and illnesses are the easiest prey to go after. Months later, on December 11th, 2024, the Department of Justice would reveal that they arrested him for producing CP, also going on to reveal his name as 20-year-old Baron Martin of Tucson, Arizona. They would reveal that in September 2022, he forced 2 minors to cut themselves all over their bodies or he'd release NSFW images of them, including one where he recorded a 16-year-old doing this and forced her to pour alcohol all over herself as she writhed in pain, gritting her teeth with a rag in her mouth. He also put a hit on the grandmother of a 13-year-old he was stalking that same month as well, citing her address as somebody and agreeing to pay him $3,000 to kidnap and murder her if the minor didn't listen to him. He's currently facing up to 30 years for CP and 10 years for cyberstalking, and I'm willing to bet the book will be thrown at him, so he's likely to be gone for a very long time. In March 2024, alternative media site Unicorn Right will post their own article going over their personal investigation into 764 and talk about someone who goes by the name of Vort in those circles. It turns out his real name is 18-year-old Kalana Limkin of Honolulu, Hawaii, and that he started a splinter group called Cultist during his time online, doing just the same like every other 764 splinter group we've been talking about. In March 2023, he would get doxxed by somebody named Ada, going on to brag about how it was false and that the police will never find it no matter how hard they try, saying how Cultist was made to become the last group once all the others got caught by the feds. Kalana would get arrested on December 13th, 2023, later that same year, and an affidavit written by Special Agent Kara Miyake would come out that same day revealing the stuff they found out about him. They would say the FBI opened an investigation on him in May after identifying him soliciting CP and self-harm images from known minors. They would find out he posted 5 images of CP that same March he got doxxed, with Agent Kara going into explicit detail on each picture that I can't show you the explanation of for obvious reasons. This screenshot of one of the images he had on himself should be more than enough to show y'all just how sick he is though, and I'm sure y'all can fill in the blanks there pretty easily. In June 2023, the FBI would interview one of his victims, in which they would say to met an Omegle and that he was screen sharing a video of a 5-year-old being raped, in which they ended up joining Cultists after he invited her in. After getting arrested, he would admit to asking minors to send NSFW images to him and receiving it on Cultist, in which they would get his phone and find all that stuff we just went over. On December 19th, while waiting to see if he'd be denied bail or not, his attorney would be changed to somebody else for an unknown reason, and on the 21st, he would expectedly be denied bail and continue to stay in prison and no one's surprise. As far as I can tell, he hasn't been sentenced yet, with a Department of Justice article about him saying he's facing up to 20 years in prison, but I'm also willing to bet it'll probably be a bit more given how things have gone down for 764 members so far. On December 5th, 2024, 24-year-old Massachusetts citizen Ryan Stenwood could be arrested and charged at 4 criminal counts including cyberstalking, stalking, and use of fire in the commission of a federal felony. Despite being expelled from high school and no real future on the surface, Ryan was a member of 764 of course, and when the police went through his phone they would find a 15-minute video of him and an unknown person encouraging someone identified as KM to get drunk and carve their initials into their skin, eventually going to the hospital because of it. He would even get her family's home swatted and encourage her to commit on multiple occasions, such as one time in 2021 where he hired a friend named Patrick McGovern Allen to firebomb a miner's house, in which he would smash a window and throw a Molotov inside, recording the attack in the process. Ryan would again hire Patrick to shoot up KM's house sometime in 2022 as well, damaging the property and nobody getting injured in the process thankfully. Patrick was actually arrested back in August that year and was sentenced to 13 years in prison back in October 2023, though he never named Ryan at all during his time under investigation, with police only finding this out after Ryan confessed. A federal judge ruled that he would stay behind bars as he awaited his trial on Christmas Eve that year, and notably in the same article when going over how the police found CP on Bradley Cadenhead's electronics during his case, they would say Ryan was found with that as well, meaning that he's probably going to jail for a while given how things have been going for 764 members. Also, Patrick McGovern Allen is located at McKean Federal Correctional Institution in Pennsylvania for those wondering. In February 2024, a 14-year-old in Alberta, Canada would be arrested and charged with making CP, distributing CP, possession of CP, non-consensual distribution of intimate images, and making/possession of explosives. Given he's a minor, Canada hasn't released any information on him, not even outright confirming if he was part of 764 or not, but given the multiple articles talking about him very heavily imply he was, as they all mention how 764 exists, it's safe to assume he was in these circles given that and the charges against him. In March 2024, an article on the German website Der Spiegel will be released talking about 764. While a lot of it is talking about Sophia's story just like the Wired article, at one point it specifically talks about a German 764 member only known by his online handle White Tiger, going on to say how he's on trial for CP charges to nobody's surprise. In one instance, the reporter would visit his parents to interview them about his charges and talk about how they don't seem to grasp just how bad he is, in which White Tiger himself will join after they called him on the phone. The article would reveal that he bragged about having 16 terabytes of CP in the past, yet when they were now talking to him one-on-one, he clammed up and refused to speak any further. I tried to look more into this, but given this is all happening in Germany and I don't know anything about German law, I have no idea if he's in jail or still on trial. However, he's probably going to jail given how things have been going down, so unless someone knows more, I'll have to leave it at that for now. In January 2024, Brazilian police will conduct Operation Discordia, obviously named after the Discord app, a multi-state operation where they went to multiple cities such as Tabatinga and Sao Paulo to conduct search warrants on people committing similar acts to 764 members. While it's never directly stated if these are 764 members or not, their modus operandi was the exact same, with 2 teenagers getting arrested for extorting children online and making them produce CSAM content and killing various animals. Given how Brazilian police and jails are like, they're probably screwed for the rest of their lives, that is, if they even make it out of jail alive. On December 17th, 2024, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation would finish up Operation Autumn Shield, in which for the past 3 months they were undercover to identify and locate children who were being exploited by a group known as 101, another splinter of 764. The operation was a success as they were able to locate 19 total victims and arrest 10 members in particular, also revealing the person who started 101 was a 14-year-old boy, again showing just how young some of these people are in these groups. This case is particularly disgusting as one of the pieces of evidence they would find included a father using AI imaging software to produce CP of his very own daughter and sharing it online. They would reveal they were still trying to get into contact with another 8 minors that they found, and that 5 of the 19 they were able to find were rescued from one particular person sharing their images online. The 10 people caught are as follows and also had their charges listed as well. 39-year-old Michael Houston Williford, 47-year-old Joshua James Long, 22-year-old Rory Colin Frericks, 28-year-old Rodney W. Griffin, 28-year-old Stephen Thomas Dyer, 35-year-old Brandon Jean Collier, an unnamed 16-year-old, 59-year-old Anthony Loughton Spicer, 51-year-old Wade Ellis Williams, and 21-year-old Cody Baird. This was an especially big catch against 764 affiliated members, and the fact they're able to get so many people in just 3 months shows the feds aren't messing around with these people at all despite the cult only being around for about 4 years now. These are just a small handful of some of the members going on here, and I'm sure more are getting investigated as we speak. Now you've probably noticed that 764 members have been caught at a high rate since around late 2023, and that's because on September 12th, 2023, the FBI would make a public service announcement about them and how dangerous they are, deeming them the highest mark as a tier 1 threat given just how rapid they grew and how widespread they are online. There's a reason they haven't been messing around with their prison sentences for these people. They're sending a message to anyone else part of these groups that they aren't playing around. And since the second half of 2024 2024, they've especially upped their arrests on even the most notable members like Baron Convict Martin, as we saw earlier. In fact, in September 2024, the most known 764 Telegram channel will be wiped after it was revealed that Telegram has been giving various governments info on any user of the application despite branding itself against that kind of stuff, showing they're starting to be extra careful online now that they know the feds are on their case. I'm 100% confident more arrests are going to be made in the next couple years as they continue to send current and former members to jail, so if I were you, I'd keep an eye out for any more news reports in the meantime. Now I mentioned earlier about some group called MKU and talking about the No Lives Matter stuff having to do with Cameron Finnegan. We'll get into that soon enough, but I'm just gonna let y'all know now that if you thought 764 was bad, that group is way worse on levels I never thought were possible. On April 12, 2022, a 17-year-old living in Romania named Nico Luciano would kill a 74-year-old woman with a knife, all while live streaming it on Discord for a friend to see. He's originally from Germany and had a rough upbringing as both his parents are drug addicts, with him having frequent violent outbursts as a child. He would be sent to a psychiatric clinic in 2011 at just 7 years old and sent to live in an intensive care residential group until 2013, and then eventually in the summer of 2016 would be sent to Romania to live in a re-educational foster care home at just 12 years old. It was during his time in Romania where he would join 764 and start going under the name Tobbs online, becoming infamous in those circles as one of the most sadistic members, with Sophia from the Wired article earlier stating that he used to take random dogs from the pound and beat them to death for fun. Nico had actually attacked 2 random people weeks before his murder and recorded them as well, making it clear he was psyching himself up into eventually following through with the act. The difference here is that after getting arrested hours later and finding CP and similar material on his phone, he was still by far much more evil than those other people, as screenshots leak out about him bragging about murdering the woman both on Discord and on Telegram. This wasn't typical of 764 members, as very rarely would they get involved directly in attacking someone themselves, and it turns out the reason he attacked the woman was because he believed she was Roma, making it a racially motivated act as well, which is also atypical of 764 members. An article on Der Spiegel will go into detail on Nico, notably referring to him as Luca, possibly due to the fact he was underage and a law surrounding that kind of stuff, revealing that in October 2022 while in court he was wearing a shirt that said, "Satan is my co-pilot" on his sleeve. Now 764 has taken the edgy aesthetics surrounding Satanism as part of their online branding, but a very large majority of members don't actually believe in any of that. It's purely for aesthetic purposes to seem scary and edgy online. Nico is different, however, as we can see, and the article will go on to reveal that when he was just 11 years old, he would set other kids' hair on fire and threatened to kill one with a shard of glass. It was clear he was pure evil since he was just a little boy, and so in August 2023 he would be sentenced to just 14 years in prison in Romania, which is still kinda short, but it's better than something less, I suppose. Now the main thing investigators are wondering was why did Nico do these acts to begin with? Sure, the connection to 764 implied it was just him being one of the more sadistic members, but it turns out the reason he murdered a woman was because he wanted to become part of something called the Maniacs Murder Cult. Now the Maniacs Murder Cult, better known by their abbreviations MKY and MKU, is a white nationalist terrorist organization started by Ukrainian neo-Nazi Igor Krasnov in 2017 when he was just 14 years old to promote terroristic acts against the world in order to further the movement of accelerationism, which is basically destabilizing society as quickly as possible by any means necessary, including mass violence. Satanism, unlike how it's just used for edgy stuff in 764, is heavily promoted and followed within the MKU, as those members aren't internet edgelords like 764 over here. They have a belief they follow and an agenda to push, and given their goals to destabilize society by any means necessary, they're shown to be an evil worse than 764 could ever dream of. Given we got all these connections going on here, it's best to start from the very beginning as things would be a giant confusing mess, so let's get right into it. The Order of Nine Angles, aka O9A, is a militant satanic left-hand path occultist and terrorist network that was said to have started in the 1970s in the UK, best known for its usage of neo-Nazi ideology and accelerationism beliefs throughout their network. They became more widely known in recent times after the arrest of 24-year-old US soldier Jarrett William Smith in 2019 after it was discovered he was teaching people how to make bombs over Facebook and Telegram in order to attack civilians and military locations, more specifically, Democratic member Beta O'Rourke, and also planned to join the neo-Nazi Ukrainian paramilitary group Azov Battalion, only to end up with the United States after not making the cut. Turns out Smith was also part of the Atomwaffen Division, a far-right neo-Nazi terrorist group that was known to have connections to the Order of Nine Angles and were considered a Nexion or splinter group of O9A. They technically disbanded in 2020, but other groups featuring old members have since been made, and Smith will get sentenced to 30 months in prison in February 2020, meaning he's currently a free man right now. However, soon after Smith's arrest, the military would crack down on other Satanists within their ranks, such as in June 2020 when they arrested 22-year-old Ethan Melzer for planning an attack on his own unit by leaking confidential information about them to members of 09A and an 09A Nexion called a Waffen division. Ethan Melzer would plead guilty in June 2022 and would get sentenced to 45 years in prison in March 2023, in which during the investigation they would reveal he was a member of the Order of Nine Angles since 2017, going on to reveal some messages he sent to fellow members, such as, "You just gotta understand that I'm currently risking my literal free life to give you all this," and that he was expecting results. He's currently located at the Marion Federal Correctional Institution where he won't get out till 2058, so things ain't exactly looking bright for his future. Now obviously this is already some pretty insane stuff, but where the Order of Nine Angles comes into play with 764 all starts as somebody named Angel Almeida. Despite being named Angel, he was anything but, as in November 2018 he would be arrested for grand theft in Ocala, Florida and serve a year and a half in prison, in which on release in spring 2020 would move out to Queens, New York to live with a relative of his. However, he would start to post pictures on social media showing off various guns he had on him, including threats of violence, stuff about the Order of Nine Angles, and child abuse. He would get involved with 764 very early in its lifespan, and in fact was even seen joining the call where Bradley and Zachary were extorting that one girl when her father walked in on them under his online name Doug. The FBI would be tipped off about Almeida in September 2021 after an anonymous person would say he was posting CP and met up with an underage girl in real life as well, in which they would go through his social media and other internet history, including finding this lovely photo of him posing next to that crazy German flag, wearing a shirt that says Kitty Fiddler, and putting his computer background to say exactly what it says on screen. The FBI would use the fact he had guns on him despite being a felon to raid his place, in which they would find multiple NSFW images of children on his devices, and most interestingly, a blood pact with an 09A Nexion called the Satanic Front as the patches on the paper are from them, alongside more material related to them throughout his room. They would also find out that he met up with a second minor and held her at gunpoint, going on to force her to carve her own neck so he could drink her own blood, showing this dude is definitely on another level of evil. Almeida's counts are as follows: 1 count of felon in possession of firearm and ammunition, 1 count of exploitation and attempted exploitation of a child, 1 count of coercion and enticement, and 1 count of CP. The court stuff surrounding Almeida is pretty interesting, such as a couple transcripts being released for people to read. In a hearing on June 8, 2023, right after his lawyer confirmed he was willing to represent him in court, Almeida would respond basically calling him the N-word multiple times and insult the man for no other reason than pure hatred. In a hearing a few days later on the 13th, he would confirm he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and not taking any medication to no one's surprise, and later on after being offended they were charging him with the exploitation of a minor, he would respond as follows: "I've been in lockup since 14. You tell me how that makes sense. Ain't that child abuse? Come on now. Y'all can suck my dick. Y'all full of shit. I don't listen to none of these morals, none of these bullshit ass ethics, man. I'm a beast, homie. What you talking about, homie? I'm a god, homeboy. I do whatever I want, homie. Screw you. Screw America. Screw the law, homie. Straight up." This deranged attitude isn't shocking, as it comes to no one's surprise that Almeida not only tried to attack a Department of Justice staffer in the crowd while in court, but also one of his many lawyers that he was going through like water. In fact, before his June outburst we just went over, one of his lawyers would write a note to the judge on June 1st saying that he's been trying to get a productive conversation going with him for a while now, even contacting his own family to help. However, just after 2 minutes on a phone call with Almeida, he would hang up and his family would ghost him, leading him to resign from the case as there's no way for him to work now. Also, despite being in federal custody for well over 3 years now as of this video, Angel Almeida still hasn't been sentenced, but given his clear mental issues, even if his eventual sentencing somehow ends up being light, he'll likely stay under psychiatric care for the rest of his life, as he's currently located at the Devens Federal Medical Center in Ayer, Massachusetts, where they're probably pumping him full of drugs this very moment. Now, as you can see, Angel Almeida was very clearly a Satanist himself, and alongside Bradley Cadenhead's interest in the material, they both played a part in the edgy branding that made up 764's online persona. However, as we know by now, 764 didn't actually care about that, nor had any motives outside of torturing people online and looking edgy while doing it, unlike how Atomwaffen Division and MKU were actively using Satanist and neo-Nazi ideology to push their goal of accelerationism. That's where No Lives Matter comes into play, as even though its origins aren't concrete, as I've read multiple contradictory statements from various internet sources, they seem to have been formed by 764 members who wanted to start their own sector of accelerationism. Now, whether they did it in order to be edgy or not is still unknown, but I personally believe it was to be edgy, given how their track record has shown them of not having any sort of political reasons doing their things, but rather clout-based instead. Because of these reasons, No Lives Matter would fall off for a moment after being created. However, MKU would revive No Lives Matter and see potential in grooming the more radical and impressionable young members into committing acts of violence over in the West to further accelerationism, something that actually went over in my video on the Wisconsin shooter Samantha Rupp now and the whole Terrorism subculture within the Telegram app. Part of that also went over how in these circles they make various manuals on how to commit acts of violence and the best way to do so, in which we already went over one earlier when talking about 764 and No Lives Matter member Cameron Finnegan. This all ties back to MKU, as soon after Yegor created it back in 2017, he and other people who shared the same vision as him would start to record themselves committing mass acts of destruction and terror around their city of Dnipro, Ukraine, and post it on the Russian social media site VK, as well as their Telegram channels for people to see, ranging from harmless graffiti to beating people up, and as you saw with Nico from earlier, straight up murdering people for entry as well. During their slow growth online, one of those Atomwaffen Division revival groups called the National Socialist Order were going to create the National Socialist Order of 9 Angles, another Nexion of 09A. Alongside that, there'd be another Nexion called the Temple of Blood, known for its much more radical rhetoric that's been around since 2003, and it was all the radical influences from the Satanic Front, Temple of Blood, and NS09A that the MKU would find themselves attracted to as they grew more and more evil, to put it frank. In fact, the NS09A would even have a page dedicated to the MKU at one point in time on their website, showing their connection together was a solid if not strong one. Also, funny thing about the Temple of Blood, turns out the creator Joshua Caleb Stutter has been an informant for the Fed since 2003, and that was only recently revealed in 2021 in a court case, meaning that the Feds have had their hands on this Order of 9 Angles stuff for over 2 decades now and still let them grow despite that. Ain't that just interesting? That's a whole other rabbit hole we're not getting into, but just knowing that the Feds have been in on this for over 2 decades now is just astounding to learn. Now, Yegor Krasnov would be arrested in January 2020 and has been in jail ever since, but a new leader by the name of Commander Butcher would take his place and keep things rolling within the Maniac Murder cult in the meantime. However, Russian authorities would start to crack down on various members, as in February 2021, they would announce they arrested 16 members of the cult within their borders, as their influence had made it to them despite the war going on between Ukraine and Russia during the time. Later on that same year in December, they would announce they arrested a total of 106 members of the cult now, notably also trying to say the Ukrainian government was working with them despite there being no evidence for this, as a form of propaganda to make them look bad and justify the war. In April 2022, they would arrest another 60 people from the cult within their borders again, and in January 2023 would designate them as a terrorist organization that should be stopped at all costs. Now, I mentioned those manuals that these Telegram groups make in order to teach each other how to commit acts of violence and radicalize one another, so it comes to no one's surprise that the MKU has perhaps one of the most infamous out there, called the Hater's Handbook, written by Commander Butcher himself. It includes lots of violent and hateful rhetoric among various images of disturbing satanic artworks meant to instill a sense of hate inside the reader, including how they use a system called murder points for initiation and to stay part of the group. With the nastier the stuff they do, the higher the points they get in order to hit their quota for the month. It even includes excerpts directly aimed at the young people still in school to commit shootings, and given those who are reading can only get it by being in these circles, it was surely the kind of encouraging language that they wanted to read before they committed their act of terror. It's a multi-page document full of satanic worship, instructions on how to commit mass acts of terrorism, and straight up pure evil. And when researching around, I found this screenshot of someone who apparently has a paperback version of it, meaning there might be physical editions out there being spread among these circles. Now, earlier we saw how the Feds have been increasing the arrests made on 764 members soon after their public announcement in September 2023. Well, even though 764 had a connection with MKU through No Lives Matter and posted about it online before, in May 2024, No Lives Matter would cut off 764 for some reason, according to an article from the Combating Terrorism Center posted in September 2024. I tried figuring out what the exact reason was myself to no avail, but rumors say it was because the Feds were arresting 764 members left and right, and the MKU didn't want to get caught up in that. However, I personally believe it was because they realized that despite their attempts to radicalize Americans through 764, they realized they don't care about their beliefs and just want to torture people online for clout instead. So they deemed it a waste of time to try and convince them into terroristic acts, as people want to do that will likely run into the MKU themselves on their own terms, and I think the recent wave of arrests was just a small part of their decision to cut them off rather than the sole reason. Now, despite leaving 764 behind so they can get back to their own thing, Commander Butcher would be arrested on July 6, 2024 in Moldova by Interpol agents and revealed to be 20-year-old Georgian national Mikhail Chekikbishvili. It would be revealed by the Department of Justice that Mikhail planned to poison people in the United States when speaking with an MKU recruit back in September 2023, only for it to turn out the recruit was actually a Fed who was undercover. He would start to put the plan in motion in November and give the agent a list on how to pull it off piece by piece, saying for him to dress up as Santa and give out candy laced with poison at upcoming Christmas in New York, notably saying to only give it out to minorities as expected from the cult. This would of course not happen, as he was talking to a Fed, and so months later he would eventually eventually get arrested, as we already know. An affidavit going into detail on Mikhail's arrest would be made, in which it mentions how he visited the United States in spring 2022 to hang out with his girlfriend and that he was working at a Jewish rehab center in New York and tried to kill a patient. It also includes more miscellaneous conversations he had with the undercover agent, such as how using fertilizer is the simplest and best way to make bombs, also teaching him how to make Molotovs as well. The agent would say he tried making Molotovs on Halloween but they weren't working. Mikhail would respond saying, "Sometimes don't explode, right?" Clearly referencing that he's done this before, and soon after this would hatch up that poison candy plan in order to do bigger action in Breivik without getting caught, a reference to Anders Behring Breivik, a Norwegian native who killed over 70 people back in the 2011 Norway attacks. Christmas would pass and Mikhail would move the plan to January, but it seemed by January 18th, 2024 that the feds got what they wanted, as that would be the last time he contacted the undercover agent, at least according to how the affidavit is written. They would also leak a small string of messages between the agent and one of Mikhail's accounts, Human 666 Grinder, in which the agent tried his hardest to fit in with the crowd as he gathered up the information he needed. The rest is more the same, and as you know already, he got arrested, and is currently facing 50 years max in prison if convicted on all accounts against him. Since then, 764 has been doing their own thing in their own corner, and MKU has moved on back into their own stuff since they dropped 764, but both seem to be in rocky waters now that the United States media has learned about them and the feds are going full throttle to get rid of them by any means necessary. That doesn't mean stuff is slowing down with the MKU, as on January 2nd, 2025, a random member would tag up a local community center in Winnipeg, Canada with graffiti representing the cult, with news outlets reporting it as typical anti-Semitism, given very few people know about the connection going on here. I'm sure once the Canadian police are made aware of the implications behind the taggings, they'll take things a whole lot more serious. But still, it shows that even though things have been rocky for the Maniac Murder Cult, they're still trying to influence the West into accelerationism and committing acts of terror on their behalf in one way or another. 764 also still has some movement going on, as on January 4th, 2025, a 14-year-old member by the name of Jay will be live streaming himself with others on Discord slashing tires around his hometown of Bora, Sweden before stabbing a random person with a knife, in which he would get arrested shortly after by the police. Leaked screenshots from earlier that day show him saying if he should pull a Slain off or finish the job, an obvious reference to 764 member Murad Slain Hadiri from earlier, who also stabbed random people and got caught by the police. He also called his impending attack a Reconquista, a reference to the historical reconquest during which Christian kingdoms regained control of the Muslim Iberian Peninsula after going to war with them in the ancient days. The attack doesn't seem racially motivated, however, and more so just another crazy person wanting to hurt others. But still, it shows 764 still has some movement going on given the direct reference to Slain when planning the attack. The attack itself also comes from a group called Dole, in which they've been branding themselves as their own sector of this ever-growing terrorgram landscape, so it seems there's another group that probably already has a couple feds in it trying to do whatever they're doing in the name of whatever, as I have no idea if they're accelerationists or clout goblins yet. However, I do know that Jay was an MKU fanatic, as he would get a girl to make a cut sign with his and the cult's name together, so clearly he's a mix of 764, MKU, and this new little group all in one here. There was another recent attack by 17-year-old Solomon Henderson on January 22nd, 2025 at the Antioch High School in Nashville, Tennessee, in which he would injure one person and kill both himself and another in the process. He would also drop his own manifesto, which I'm just gonna say, I can't show you most of the contents due to the vile racism within, but what I can show you is that despite spewing this hateful rhetoric against black people, he himself was black, as you can clearly see on screen. He hated his own race and was taught the movement of accelerationism through multiple online sources, which his manifesto has various copy and pasted parts of other shooters' manifestos and pieces from Telegram manuals. There's even one part that reads extremely similarly to the school shooting piece from the Hater's Handbook that I showed earlier, making it very clear that Solomon read it himself at one point, as the sentence structure lines up almost exactly like the original. At the very end, when posting his social medias, at one point he shows he went by the name Droidcell on Twitter, and it comes to no one's surprise that Solomon here was one of the very people who was encouraging Samantha Rupnow to shoot up her own school, in which he specifically told her to live stream it. Samantha didn't end up doing that, so Solomon would try himself on his Kick account, Honorary Yakubian. The username is a clear reference to the story of Yaqub, a figure in the mythology of the Nation of Islam who was said to have created white people as an evil race. Given his Kick account name, was obviously promoting himself as an honorary white person who did an evil act. Solomon's Discord account was also named Rupnow Groiper, with the term Groiper referring to fans of the alt-right political figure Nicholas Fuentes, and an leaked voice message alongside a cutesy art piece of MKU and Temple of Blood figures and make a reference to 764 and MKU directly just 3 days before his attack.
Attacking my school for 764 and MKY. 764.
It was very obvious this kid was influenced by all the dark figures surrounding this entire video's premise, and he did exactly what they wanted him to do, just like Samantha Rupnow. His so-called inspirations for committing these acts of terror are bizarre as well, with him naming off huge internet figures like Mr. Beast and iDubbbz, with him even shouting out a specific conservative political commentator named Candace Owens and YouTubers Turkey Tom and Ruben Sim for helping push him down his alt-right pipeline. However, I'm familiar with the tactics that 764 and all these Telegram channels do. They'll point fingers, lie, twist things, do whatever they can to get the focus off of them and onto the other people, and that's what they're doing here, as I very highly doubt any of the people they named actually meant anything to them. They're just trying to cause some chaos. The thing that gives it away is that Solomon names off people like Destiny and Hassan Piker, two leftist people, as inspirations as well, and in fact lists the children's game series Skylanders as one of the games that supposedly radicalized him. Either way, it was clear that Solomon Henderson was very mentally ill and was influenced by these radical accelerationist groups to do what he did, and if anything, this shows that these groups are still gaining momentum throughout the world. Now, as y'all have seen, this ain't the usual internet story about somebody saying a hot political take or making some edgy jokes that people overblow. This is real terrorism at foot, having to do with multiple cults and groups all connected back to one singular satanic cult. It's actually astounding putting it all together here because I've never seen so many sectors of evil all interconnected between one another like this, as even though the main focus here was 764, y'all just saw how there are actual terrorist groups who have tried to inch their way into that circle in order to influence them into committing mass shootings and other acts of violence. As far as 764 goes, it seems the cult itself has grown in infamy online enough to the point where it won't ever technically go away, but probably just fall apart as people make their own subgroups inspired by them. It's like people taking influence from a singular figure even if they're dead already. The same concept applies here even if 764 will likely cease to exist within the next 5 or so years, given how the feds have cracked down exponentially on cult members since their public service announcement back in September 2023, and even in recent times as more and more arrests have gone down since this video's release. On January 21st, 2025, it was revealed that Moist Nigerian aka Zachary Dosh was getting released from prison soon, though it seems he was never convicted of anything during his time awaiting trial, so perhaps they had a change of heart and believed he was just caught up in the wrong crowd or something. I don't know, and I'll probably never know, but as of today, he's likely out and about in the real world once again despite all that he's done. Also, on January 30th, about 10 days later, the Department of Justice would announce they've arrested more members of Cult, Rohan's little extortion group from earlier, and in fact would reveal that he's been in custody since 2022 and that his real identity is 28-year-old Rohan Sandeep Rain. It seems that things are starting to head in the right direction on the Cult investigation, so only time will tell how things go down on their end. As far as those other groups go, I'm sure they're on rocky waters as well, and while the main focus was 764 here, I wanted to talk about him to show y'all just how deep this all truly goes. I do want to say now, if you yourself watching this video somehow gets wrapped up with these people and they try to extort you by leaking your nudes or whatever, gather up all the information you can on the person you're talking to and report them to your local police, because even if it's possible they might have not heard about 764 yet, they have the resources to research the cult themselves and understand that they're the real deal. You've seen it for yourselves how they've been arresting underage teenagers and adults involved with the cult and throwing a book at them, so don't be scared the police might not care or not do anything, because as we've seen, they've been doing a lot. Something that's interesting is that 764 is a small part of an online network known as the Com. Basically people who participate in shady and illegal stuff online, be it for money or their own amusement. MusicCom is a group I've heard about in the past as they tend to hack into stuff in order to leak unreleased music. But seeing 764 become the forefront of ExtortionCom in such a short amount of time was pretty insane all things considered. It's gonna be an interesting couple of years seeing all those future reports drop on the news lines, so until then I'm just gonna sit back and keep an eye out for any updates on the cult and the members' whereabouts. Shout out to my channel members for helping support my content, and shout out to my bestie tier members Wrath Wolin, Nami, Cody, Laura Hertzman, Cheems, Daniel, Mystical GB, Hyper aka V, and Trendy Dragon. Go check out my Patreon and YouTube memberships if you want to support me yourself in the description below, and I hope you join as soon as you can. It's been a long, depressing journey these past couple months, but at least there's some light at the end of this tunnel now that the feds are cracking down on all these groups extremely hard. It's now just a matter of how long it takes before the tide officially turns on them. If you ask me though, it's happening as we speak.